Hello and welcome to another episode of SecDef Talks, which is a series of discussions and dialogues on national security and privacy. My name is Kazim Rizvi and I'm the founder of The Dialogue, and we are presenting this series in partnership with Nalcon and CNN News 18. And today we have a very special guest with us. I would like to welcome Mr. Yashovardhan Azad, who is a former secretary to the government of India. Mr. Azad, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you very much and inviting me to this platform. I'm really looking forward because it's a very critical issue that you're planning to discuss with me.
Thank you, Mr. Azad. And we are also joined with Mr. Saikat Datta, who is an advisor to the Dialogue and Nalcon. And also we have Mr. Antariksh Shah, who is a co-founder with Nalcon. And as we proceed, now I would like to hand over to my colleague Saikat.
Thank you, Kazim. I'll just take a brief minute to introduce Mr. Azad. He comes from a very distinguished family of Bihar. He joined the Indian Police Service and served in the state of Madhya Pradesh before moving to the Intelligence Bureau. He has specialized in a number of things like counterterrorism. He has been associated with some of the biggest breaks while tracking major terrorist groups. He's done a lot of work in VIP security, and he has spent most of his life doing a lot of intelligence work before he moved on as the Secretary to the Government of India, where he was Secretary Security. After retirement, he was also the Central Information Commissioner. And it was a sort of a shift where from a very secret world, he moved on to a world where he was pushing for more and more information to be brought out under the Right to Information Act. So you have a person who has seen policing, who has seen intelligence, who has also seen the Right to Information Act and the rights of citizens as enshrined under the Act. So you have a very, very interesting person who's seen the whole gamut of things when it comes to security, technology, as well as information. With that, I'll hand over to our colleague, Mr. Antariksh Shah, for a quick introduction to Nalcon, and then we'll start the discussion with Mr. Azad. Thank you.
Thank you, Saikat. Nalcon is one of Asia's biggest information technology security conference, where we bring together researchers from all over the world to talk about latest innovative research in the field of defense or offensive side of cybersecurity. It could be related to web, infrastructure, mobile, or to the latest futuristic technology like AI and machine learning, including hardware security. Over to you, Kazim.
Thank you so much, Antariksh. And of course, it's been a delight for us to collaborate with Nalcon and also to partner with CNN News 18 towards this series. And without wasting any further time, I would now like to go to Mr. Azad and ask him a few questions, and we'll rotate with our colleagues Saikat and Antariksh as this interview progresses. So Mr. Azad, first of all, I would like to ask you and understand from you, as a veteran of India's intelligence community and as a former IPS officer, how do you see the role of technology and its impact on security today in this 21st century India?
Well, at the very outset, let me say that technology and security have a very intimate relationship. If you look at technology, it's like a double-edged sword. Technology and the innovations can lead to major strides in the field of defense, in the field of internal security. On the other hand, if technology falls into the hand of rogue elements, it can be one of the biggest threats. And one of the clearest examples you can see are the weapons of mass destruction. And on the other hand, that is why for safety measures to boost up security, you have the missile technology today, and where we have the capability of launching missiles from whether it's land, air, or the ocean. Let me also say that if you look to our borders, for example, look at the example of drone technology. While drones have been used for life-saving attempts, the healthcare, for mapping, it is also being used on our borders for supplying drugs and weapons. So here is the two-faced technology you can see very, very clearly for a common man. And then if you come internally for solving our conflicts, technology has much to do by way of producing non-lethal weapons in areas of conflicts in India. And then we come to a very, very critical part. Internet, for example, the policy of India towards internet has been for its robust growth, because it's a vibrant platform for interchange of ideas, for information gathering, dissemination, etc., etc. But the biggest danger with the internet also is the safety and security. How do you protect it from hackers? How do you protect it from the terrorist groups like the IS, which are luring their targets on the internet itself? And that's why today, if you see the modern warfare, it is not really on the border, but it is on the right at the heart of your country, where the cybersecurity has become a very, very critical component of our defense alignment. Today, data hacking or the attacks on data are tremendous. And 2012 was a very, very bad year as far as this is concerned. And that's why cybersecurity market today, which has government involved, which has the IT-enabled services, which has the banking system, is critical to our sector. In fact, this is actually the core industry which we have to protect. And in fact, according to one of the reports, the increase in the attacks between 2017 and 18 were almost to the tune of 292%. And that is why, if you see the industry, the cybersecurity industry, it's growing at a phenomenal rate. It's from $2 billion to about $3 billion in 2022. So by summing up, I would just like to say that today we have to look at for a security professional, as also the state, as also people who are from the civil society. They will be looking at technology and security very, very closely as to how it unfolds in the future for huge impact, whether it's on security, whether it's on cyber security, whether it's on privacy, etc., etc.
I'd like to go to Antriksh, and then we'll take it from there. Antriksh, over to you.
So I have a simple question. Because you come from the government, this question is very interesting for me because I come from the security industry. I've always seen there's a negotiation between the government, the civil society, activists, when it comes to creating a fine balance between legitimate security interest and the rights of the citizen. So how do we establish this balance as technology is increasingly getting more and more complex in the future, and there are a lot of challenges for the LEAs? So your thoughts on that, sir?
Well, that is the real dilemma facing the world. I mean, facing all the democracies today, as to where would be the limits of the individual freedom, and where would be the element of state surveillance or whatever you call it. In this debate between the state surveillance and modern technology taking over, and I'll give you an example of, say, 9/11. 9/11 changed the perspective of the entire world, right? And since then, there is tremendous patrolling of the internet by all the nations. Surveillance, for example, has become the norm only because it's considered to be an alternative to an all-encompassing intelligence. It's not possible to get intelligence, all over. And that's why, on one hand, when you have more and more technology used also by the corporations to get, maximum data from the individuals, the state would also like to ensure that this entire platform which is being used is not being used for things, say, for criminal acts, for child sexual abuse, etc., etc. So what would you say that is the best method for this? Best method to stop this kind of thing would be definitely legislation, right? So we certainly need a data protection authority. We need a data protection bill so that this part is, ensured that whatever is put on the internet is safe. And the other thing would be that how the people and citizens are kept secure from the acts of the hackers or of the terrorists. Now, the other important thing which I would like to mention here is that surveillance mechanism in the West, there has a very strong judicial oversight, whereas in our country, it is mostly executive driven. So to fine tune this, you have to have a very strong data protection authority, which takes care of all the infringement of the individual freedom. And I suppose that is the only way to go ahead in a democracy.
Sir, I'd like to move on to privacy. And in August 2017, a 9-judge bench of the Supreme Court ruled that privacy is a fundamental right. As a former security practitioner, how do you view this judgment?
It was a path-breaking judgment. You know, in democracy, privacy is sacrosanct. Sacrosanct. You know, European nations have already, thought in terms of right to be forgotten, and they have allowed it also. That is so much of value which attached to privacy. In fact, you know, it reminds me of what William Pitt had said in 18th century. And you know what he said? He says, a poor man in a cottage can defy all forces on the ground. His roof may shake. Storm can come in. Rains can come in. But even the King of England, with all his forces, cannot cross the threshold of his ruined tenements. This is what highest priority was accorded to privacy. And it's the same Britain where you have seen how where data was being sold, the private data was being sold from the police to private detectives. And also it was in England where, you know, a laptop carrying defense data was lost, which involved about 60,000 recruits. So, you know, this is what a damage to privacy can be done if you're not careful about protecting your data. And data is, after all, not only just data, it has also an economic value. Data is sacrosanct, it's of critical importance. Now, when the Justice Puttaswamy judgment was delivered, there was absolutely cry from the civil society that yes, we have been crying for this for a very long time. And now that privacy has come as a fundamental right, what is the government doing in terms of legislation for protecting this right? And you remember that is why Justice retired Sri Krishnan Committee was constituted, and where the Sri Krishnan Committee put up together a data bill format which was given, and later on it was of course modified, etc. And therefore the 2019 bill is a modification of Justice Sri Krishna. What I'm saying is that this debate has evolved, it has been fine-tuned, and therefore somebody is seriously thinking about these things, in which the stakeholders are, of course, the civil society, the state, the law enforcement, and other people too.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to move to Saikat to take over.
Thank you, Kazim. Sir, since the Supreme Court has ruled that privacy is a fundamental right, and it has also said that there is a legitimate need for citizens to keep their information and messages private. Since we are so much on the internet and internet-based communication technologies, how far does encryption really help keep all that private? Like on WhatsApp, we have end-to-end encryption. A lot of other applications are available which offers this encryption. And we are also seeing, third-party actors like the Chinese trying to hack into our systems and get information of our messages, etc. So where do you think can encryption play a role in safeguarding all this?
I think encryption is critical. I mean, there is no doubt. In fact, the European Economic Commission report had also said that, if you don't have encryption, it diminishes security. And therefore, today it is encryption only which will save you from various intrusions and various kinds of attacks. Look at the Pegasus spyware, which was the talk of the nation, where it attacked and hacked, worldwide the WhatsApp system and the platform. So I would say that the encryption not only protects, it makes you very stable as a system. And as I had said earlier, if you see 68% of our cybersecurity share is the government, is the IT-enabled sector, which is critical for the, look at Aadhaar, look at our banking. You have to make this system secure. You have to make this system safe. And how do you do it? You have to do it with encryption. And that is why today, I think encryption is perhaps the most important methodology to protect our interest and for data protection.
Thank you, sir. I just had another question. That a lot of these sort of surveillance, etc., has to be carried out by law enforcement or designated agencies. Like you were part of one such agency for a large part of your professional career. So in mature democracies, there is a lot of oversight mechanisms that has been put into place. The big question is, while they are watching, who watches the watchers? So having lived through that, sir, today, where do you think, for example, we inherited our agency, the Intelligence Bureau, from the United Kingdom. They, in 1989, passed one act, in 1994, another act, and made their agency through an act of parliament. The CIA in America, right from the 1940s, has been through an act of the US Congress, etc., which has, through legislative mechanisms, put in a lot of oversight mechanisms. So who watches the watchers as far as we are concerned? What should be the road ahead to make our agencies much more professional and much more safer, keeping it in tune with the tenets of our democracy?
Again, this is a very critical question which faces virtually all the democracies. I'm not talking about Russia and China, where it has been reported there is a maximum state surveillance. But in places like India or other democracies, this is a question which still the state governments and others are grappling with. Now, in India, who watches the watchers is a difficult question to answer because it's a complete executive oversight. There is no judicial oversight at all. Now, if there is this, act, Section 69 of the IT Act, which gives you the powers to surveil the internet, and even you can pick out metadata, you can do whatever you feel like, as what the civil society is really talking about. And then you're also looking for transparency reports. What does the state have to say? There are two issues, which I'd like to flag. One is that there is a problem because when you have allowed 10 agencies to surveil the net, and these agencies go for permission to the same executive authority, I mean, there's hardly any difference because the Home Secretary is an administrative guy, and whereas the field agency chief who does the tapping, there is hardly any difference. So people are objecting that this is not the kind of oversight we are looking for. And then who's the appellate authority? The appellate authority becomes the cabinet secretary, who's again at the head of the administrative setup. So what alternative do we have? Should we move in for a judicial oversight? Should we go in for judicial warrants as it happens in the United States of America or in Britain, where again the Snowden papers, reveals that there are a huge amount of metadata which has been taken up, as also the GCHQ in England, which has a huge amount of metadata from which sifts material for its own use. So this is again out in the debating arena as to whether a judicial oversight would be better or not.
So I have one question which is in two parts. Since we are talking currently on encryption, today encryption as a technology is reshaping the way we communicate among masses, right? For a country like India, which is quite diverse, where Chinese hackers are constantly stealing a lot of private data, metadata, via having a lot of apps which is being downloaded by a lot of people in the country. Does encryption help avoid them such risk? And the second part of my question is, isn't encryption integral for national security from this perspective? Because we have seen in various countries like Russia only allowing end-to-end encrypted messaging app like Telegram. Even in India, we had a circular where Zoom was not allowed to use because it didn't implement end-to-end encryption. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, there's no doubt encryption is very, very important today for security. And in fact, that is the way to go forward. As far as the second part of your question is concerned, giving a backdoor room to the security agencies in encryption can lead to a lot of problems too. In Greece it happened, and almost everything was hacked. On the other hand, breaking the entire encryption system is another problem, because it kind of makes you vulnerable. Security becomes more fragile. In fact, the debate we are talking about between Apple and the FBI a few years back in America, where they even went to the court. And thereafter, of course, the FBI has a greater technology access, and it broke through. And now I believe Apple is back, capping its vulnerabilities. So, not being an expert in this area, but I would definitely surmise that end-to-end encryption should be there, because it is for the safety of the consumer, or for the data protection. For example, if I'm giving some information about my address for getting a hamburger or something, I don't want that information to be given to a lot of other people. So in that respect, my purpose is served. So I would definitely say that for data privacy, it's important that end-to-end encryption should be there. Regarding the security agencies, how they get it, you have to, for example, legislate. You have to have, if you had a good data protection authority, you would not have this problem of so many Chinese apps coming here, because each case would have been analyzed. The other thing which I'm also trying to tell you is that much of the information which Zenhua, or whatever that name is, that latest Chinese company, which they picked up, that the data was OSINT. It was basically open information. So I don't know, one of the things which the government certainly has to do, and I'm slightly, drifting from this, but it's almost on the same way, that you have to legislate in such a way with these corporations that the information which you're taking should be with consent, and even how you're using it should also be with consent, and that has been put in the data protection. But as far as encryption goes, I think for data protection, end-to-end encryption is important for the individuals, and that is how you can keep it safe, and that is how it is also will serve our interests when it comes to the IT-enabled services, the government sector, and also the banking sector.
All right. I have another question, sir, where private companies seem far ahead in comparison to the government when it comes to creating and adopting new and futuristic technology. For example, we are talking about encryption, right? But what about when it comes to the government in breaking down the encryption algorithm, or talking about decrypting technology, right? What can the government do to build the relationship to improve their technological capabilities while working in collaboration with the community and the industry?
I'm happy that according to the material I've read in the papers in the last few days, it tells us that the government of India is already collaborating with some of the big time giants on many things, whether it's for expansion of our digital footprint, or extending our digital highway, for improving digital governance. Niti Aayog is collaborating with I think Microsoft, is with Google, with ABB and Adobe and all these multinationals for a number of things. I think Wi-Fi being given free in 3 states of Gujarat, Bihar, and Maharashtra is an excellent venture. Then in the agriculture sector, also I think in Madhya Pradesh there's an experiment going on. Microsoft is doing a great job for teaching the IT-enabled industries how to make the transactions more secure and safe. That's the greatest, I think, contribution you can make in this field, the cyber security, where a consumer feels safe, absolutely, when he's, taking out money, whether it's from the ATM or he's, giving his bank account details and all that for making a transaction. And that's why there are a lot of other areas where, in fact, I would say that the government should be more and more open in collaborating with the technical giants. Now, of course, there is a quid pro quo. The technical giants want your market, and India is a huge, huge market. So, it's like the CSR, which you have in public sector units, right? That you earn so much of profits, and therefore there is a social obligation you have. So where you work, Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation is already doing a lot of work in the health sector. So if these tech giants are contributing to the cause, nothing like it. In fact, there's another very small point I also want to mention. It is the states. Now, when we are talking about the internet, we are also talking about safety and security from the point of view from phishing or hacking or the attacks, malware, all kinds of things. And the states, each of the states have also come up with, cyber crime units, etc., etc. This is another area where to protect, where you need collaboration with the outside agencies. So while for Government of India, it might be very, very simple, but for the states to collaborate, it might be a little difficult. So there should be a platform via which these tech giants can also reach the states and help them out.
Thank you, sir. Over to Kazim.
Thanks, Antriksh. And a couple of last questions before we close for the day. There was a recent coverage in the Indian Express that, China, the state of China has been trying to analyze the metadata and the information available of Indian politicians and Indian government and important people in the country. So what do you think? What are the key sort of steps the government of India and we should take in terms of protecting that data? And how important do you think encryption could be with that respect?
Let me tell you, as I was just answering the earlier question, that it appears that most of this data which has been garnered has been from open sources. This is the problem. Basically what is happening is the data which is going out innocently by the consumer or all these people are being collected somehow. So government has to look into this, and that is why I said they have to legislate quickly. The bill hasn't come, but it also has to talk to, for example, the private corporations becoming negotiators and the government can talk to them and tell them that, listen, you can't use the data just like that. You have to take their consent, and you have to also take their consent where you're using it. Even if it's data which you collect may be very innocuous, but putting together a lot of these innocuous data openly, then it forms a pattern.
As a follow-up to this, do you think if you're communicating through an encrypted channel, it's more secure, then you are, as a consumer, less likely to make these mistakes?
No, definitely. That I have always said, that there is no substitute for encryption. And that must be resorted to, because after all, it concerns, because the data is also, it's very valuable economically. And that is why this data, to be secure and safe, has to be encrypted. The government has a great responsibility in this regard. And as you rightly said, there has to be it has to be a marketing kind of a program. That after all, the data protection of the individual also serves the state protection interests.
Thank you so much, sir. I think you made a very pertinent point over there, how important data protection and individual privacy is to a country's national security. And that is extremely critical. And I think that's something you've really sort of mentioned very clearly. Thank you so much for talking to us today. Thank you for taking out your time and speaking to us. And thank you to Nalcon and CNN News 18 for once again partnering with the dialogue on this series. And so rightly, as just to sum it up, the issues around privacy are so important nowadays, and they're linked directly with national security. And you rightly mentioned that, we have to move towards more encrypted platforms, and also making sure that we hope we can pass a data protection law very soon. It's in the parliament. but due to COVID-19, things have been disrupted. And I hope that we'll have a data protection law, we'll have a strong data protection authority, and also the fact that legitimate security interests are crucial, but at the same time, protecting privacy of citizens cannot be undermined. I think that balance coming from you, sir, is very important, and it will go a long way in also informing everybody. But thank you so much, so once again, and thank you all of you for watching us on another episode of SecDev Talks, for tuning in. And we will be soon with more such interesting and insightful discussions. So stay tuned and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.